Welcome back to my garden. The week has whizzed by, as they tend to do, out here in the tropics, even though this is a rural village and the wind could lull you to sleep in your hammock. But it has whizzed by, and mostly it's been very good. But something has been irritating me, irking me, and it's a YouTube advert. Now, one shouldn't let these things get on your nerves, and it hasn't really, but it's just kind of, it's like an annoying song that you can't stop humming. And in the advert, a Brazilian actor, I can't remember his name, it doesn't matter anyway, but he looks something like an airbrushed, photoshopped, AI-generated version of Liam Neeson. Sort of rugged, but without the rough edges. Well, maybe I'm being unfair to Liam Neeson. And he's got a very engaging accent, as indeed has Liam Neeson. And he draws you into a conversation, first of all talking about himself a little bit and saying how he's never really been someone who likes to get too comfortable. No, he likes to leave his comfort zone. And he suggests that you should do the same by buying some sort of investment banking product or investing in a fund that will take you out your comfort zone but yield compensatory dividends and benefits. Now, I don't want to spend this video, your precious time, talking about the ins and outs and the morality of this sort of advertising. That's not what irks me. It's the actual term comfort zone. Because it does seem to me that it's become a bit of a 21st century memic cliche. So I did a little bit of digging. And on my 5-minute Google search, who first coined the term comfort zone, I came up with the name Alistair White, some sort of business psychologist chap. But the bit that surprised me, I have no idea who Alistair White is, so that didn't surprise me. It may not even be his name. I looked at this an hour ago, but I may well have gotten it wrong in that time. But what surprised me is that the first time it was seriously kind of nailed down was 2009. And it seems to me that comfort zone has been around forever. But the article that I read suggested that, yes, people might have used it in a sort of offhand, metaphorical sort of way. But as a term, in psychological parlance, it only really came into vogue in some sort of article in 2009, which surprises me. And perhaps it was used before more generally, and it was only used in the business world in 2009, and this particular source thinks that the business world is all and everything. Maybe that's it, who knows? Now, I've looked at comfort zone differently since reading a book by Csikszentmihalyi, the father, grandfather, godfather of positive psychology, Hungarian emigre, and the architect of flow theory. And if you're at all familiar with flow theory, you might remember the diagram, which has on one axis the difficulty of a task, and on the other your skill level. And the flow state is sort of in the sweet spot. And I did a video some years ago talking about that, an idea that I had that we sort of spiral through it, because on either end of this, or either side of the sweet spot, we have boredom, when our skill level lies well beyond the challenge before us. We have our comfort zone, which is when we have more than enough skill to bring to bear to the task, but it's not so trivial that it's become mundane and boring. And then we have a flow state, which is where our skill level and the challenge are sort of perfectly matched. And if the challenge starts getting a little bit too difficult, we move into a state of anxiety and eventually fear. And in my Google search, the term comfort zone, there was an educational diagram, and it sort of mirrored quite nicely that sort of theory. The idea that we have a comfort zone, a fear zone, a learning zone, and a growth zone. So you can kind of see how the term comfort zone fits in very nicely into 21st century kind of positive growth psychology. And why leaving our comfort zone and moving into a mental state where we are learning and growing is a good thing. But what annoys me a little bit is that I think it doesn't tell the whole story. For a start, we use the term comfort zone both in a specific, dedicated sense and more generally. What I mean by that is, if I think of for example, my journey of chess learning, there is a point where a puzzle is boring because it is just too easy. There's a point where it's comfortable, a sort of maintenance level where I pretty much get it right, but there is some sort of challenge. And then there's a flow state where the puzzles are interesting, but I'm pretty much getting them right, and then it becomes more difficult, and the anxiety level increases, and eventually they become frustratingly difficult and eventually terrifying. And so that's in a very specific learning environment. But I think we also use comfort zone to suggest something about loosely our life in general, that we're living in our comfort zone. And I think that's what sort of annoyed me about this advert. This actor was talking about how he tried not to live in his comfort zone, as if it was this all-embracing space, and he challenged himself. And I think this is what I have a little difficulty with, because I suspect it's not true. And I think very often when people talk about leaving our comfort zone, they want to do it in a managed way. They want to take risks, but not too many. They want to feel some discomfort, but not too much. And I think whilst the sort of incremental growth that takes you from one point of your life in a given area, or maybe more generally, to another where you sort of plateau, might be done in this managed way, eventually something more radical is required. And this is what people perhaps don't want to talk about. Because what I'm proposing is that at certain points in our life, we need to embrace this idea of discomfort in a more radical way. Again, the sense I got from this advert was that leaving our comfort zone was done in a neat and tidy, and dare I say it, comfortable sort of way. You know, it's a bit like if you were living in a place, you might go on holiday to leave your comfort zone. But it struck me that this particular chap's version of that model, that paradigm, would be staying in a rather nice hotel and going to a country that was, whilst challenging perhaps, generally enjoyable, fun. Leaving your comfort zone didn't mean going to, and forgive me picking a country at random, some sort of war-torn hellhole like the Yemen or Cambodia. Forgive me, obviously, well, not obviously, but I've never been to either of those places, but they generally pop up in the news in a less than flattering way. Not so much Cambodia. I mean, you could go on a neat little trip to those wonderful ruins, but yeah, it's not an easy place, and probably a lot of Westerners would prefer Thailand. That would be their place of choice. Cambodia, if they're daring, and Laos or Burma, no, not the place to go. Because you want to leave your comfort zone, but not take too many risks. And I think actually therein lies a problem, that at certain points in our life, we need to kind of destroy ourselves. We need to be less of a growth model and something much more cataclysmic and revolutionary. We need to sort of go from being a caterpillar to a butterfly, and that might require a really brutal change. Now, I have some strong feelings about this, in part because I guess that's something that I did. Now, in fairness, I don't think I did it because I'm a daredevil. I first left South Africa because, frankly, I couldn't face military service, and some of that might have been a moral decision, but some of it might have been fear. And when I left England to go and work in Peru, it was a kind of off-the-cuff decision. I didn't really think it through. I didn't consider it as something daring. It was a bit of an adventure. But I had a job in the pocket. Something more daring would have been to go to Peru, as I did, with a backpack, or two actually, I did have two, but to have gone to Peru with a backpack and £150 in the pocket, as I did, and nothing else, as I didn't. So this idea of leaving our comfort zone, but doing it in a safe, managed sort of way, I'm not sure about that. I think, for the most part, yes, we probably, for our own personal sanity, need to stay within certain boundaries. But every now and then, life throws us dreadful curveballs, and you really do leave your comfort zone, and that's when sometimes the magic happens. And if life hasn't thrown you any curveballs, perhaps you need to inflict it upon yourself. Anyway, that's it for this week. I see there's some sort of message appearing on my screen. Perhaps there's an annoying ringtone that will disrupt this video. So I'll leave it at that. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And even if you've left your comfort zone, I do hope your lives are still filled with joy. So from sunny Brazil,